Once again, welcome to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botza. Today, we have the great pleasure in welcoming Mr. Giovanni Di Stefano, or better known as the Devil's Advocate. Today, we're going to be looking at an amazing case and a very sad case, and one that stands out in British history, and that is the one that's been called the White House Farm killings or the White House Farm murders. This involves Mr. Jeremy Bamber and 5 members of his family, his adoptive parents, his mother and father, Neville and June Bamber, his sister Sheila Caffell, and her twin 6-year-old sons, Daniel and Nicholas. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with all those people who have passed away. Let's never forget what's happened. But this is an amazing case, a fascinating case. Mr. Bamber was convicted of the 7th of August 1985 deaths that happened. He was convicted in October 1986. So many people have written about this man. So many people have commented on this man. But one man, the man that we are talking to today, Giovanni Di Stefano, has an amazing amount of knowledge and some exclusives on this case. But before we go any further, Giovanni, sir, how are you?
Well, I've got a little bit of a cold or flu or whatever the hell it is there. I hope it's not COVID. I'm going to do a COVID test later on there.
Right.
But even if it is, it just means that I'll be sort of bedridden, housebound, arresti domiciliari,
right, yeah,
home detention for 2 or 3 days, but not so bad in Monaco.
Well, can I just say, I hope you get a speedy recovery and look after yourself. Now, we've corresponded a little bit about the case of Jeremy Bamber because you, for our viewers and listeners' point of view, could you give us your involvement with Jeremy Bamber, please?
Well, I acted for him for a period of 6 years until such time that he wanted to take a different approach. He wanted to take a different avenue, a different railroad track to where he was going. I advised him against it. And of course, people who don't take my advice, generally speaking, end up in a worse position than where they are. And I feel sorry for Jeremy because we started with a 25-year minimum term tariff, and now we've ended up with a full life term. and that simply is unsustainable. But that was his decision. He's the one behind the door, and he's the one that must deal with it.
Well, indeed, and as of this year, I mean, Jeremy Bamber was originally sentenced to, I believe it was 25 years. He was sentenced for the killings. Let's not go behind, as you say in your 2001 documentary on the BBC. Let's not go behind the rulings of the judge itself. However, the case has escalated up to the Office for Police Conduct. There are 29 serious complaints that have been lodged, and seemingly these have been accepted to go back to the Criminal Case Review Commission, and it looks like there may be a possibility on the policing matters itself and for the indiscretions of the police, which 29 of which are being seriously looked at. Can you give us a little bit of insight into those, the dealings of Essex Police and what Mr. Bamber might be referring to?
Well, Essex Police have not conducted this case in the appropriate manner. I've sent you a document in the exclusive. For example, what would have been handy was to have a crime scene video of what happened when the police went in. They have lied, and said it didn't exist. I have a log, their own log, which says that it does exist. So where the hell is it? We have a log that says that an unidentified man was seen in the house.
Right.
What man? Bamber was with them. Couldn't possibly be him. He can't be in 2 places at the same time. He can't be the Scarlet Pimpernel. They seek him here, they seek him there, they seek him everywhere. So when you start with a lie, you have to be a good liar to be able to sustain it. So what the police do is they tell more lies and more lies and more lies and more. And I don't understand why. Now, there's another thing that's very interesting.
Yes.
And that involves the original detective inspector that did not believe that Bamber was guilty of these murders. What a coincidence that this man paints his house on a weekend, falls off a ladder and is dead, and is replaced by a man that does believe that Bamber did it. Now, you know, you could say that is coincidence, but what a coincidence. No investigation. You've never even heard of that, have you? That aspect.
No, but I have heard of links to one of the senior officers concerned working for the family at their caravan site. He became the head of security.
That is correct, but that's
yes.
afterwards.
Yes, that is afterwards. But that is, there seems to be quite a series of events that are very unusual, and I did not know that this gentleman fell off a ladder. How soon? What's the chronology of that?
Well, the chronology is that within a couple of weeks, when Bamber was out, he didn't think for one moment. Now, in the television program, it just says that he's replaced. It doesn't say that he fell off a ladder and died, painting his house. No. Why would a young man, you know, it was only in his middle age.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you can fall off a ladder, of course, but fell off a ladder and died. No investigation, no nothing, no, zero. And the rule of law is that if the Crown make one mistake and one lie or one misrepresentation,
yes,
as Lord Justice Chris Rose used to say, you know your duty. You have to surrender the appeal. Now, in this case, in 2005, me and Andrew Hunter in Westminster Hall, we asked a question of the Secretary of State, the then Home Secretary.
This is former MP Andrew Hunter.
That is correct. But I was there in the House of Commons with him, that before we went into the Westminster Hall, two men approached us from the security services and said, you're Mr Di Stefano and you're Mr Hunter. And we said, yes. And you can interview him and he will tell you exactly the same. So why are you raising all the dust on this here? Let him do his 25 years and then we'll let him go.
Right.
And Mr Hunter said, no, that doesn't work like that. I'm going to ask this question in the House. He said, all you're doing is you're worsening your constituent's case. Now, why would the security services? Now, I wrote the story about that. That Neville Bamber was heavily involved with the security services during the war.
Yes.
And another coincidence, 5 of his fellow colleagues all died in mysterious circumstances, some killed with their families on holiday. What a coincidence. What a coincidence.
For our viewers and listeners that might not know this, Mr Neville Bamber adopted young Jeremy when he was only 6 months old. And Jeremy is meant to be the product of a liaison between a former sergeant who was stationed at Buckingham Palace and a young lady. And this kind of adds to the mystery and the mystique of this. Also, Neville Bamber, the late Neville Bamber, was also a local magistrate. And there does seem to be quite a lot of connections between security services and the Bamber family. But also what fascinated us was that Sir David Napley, his involvement. Now, Sir David Napley, it says in your old friend Wikipedia claimed that Napley was the legal representation of Jeremy Bamber, but there seems to be some confusion about this where other.
No, he was. He originally was the lawyer.
Yes.
There. Now, let me just say something else about paternity.
Okay.
And people are going to be shocked by this, and maybe I should and maybe I shouldn't say it, but what the hell? I'm in Monaco. It is a tax-free zone. So what can happen to me?
Well, I'm in the UK.
You're in the UK.
I'm on the conduit.
Paternity was assigned to the sergeant. And that's all I'm going to say. Right. Paternity was assigned to the sergeant. Can I just say, look at Jeremy Bamber's face and look at some of the male members of the royal family. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Well, that is quite an extraordinary point.
Pick up the two photos. Pick up photo of Jeremy Bamber and find the photos of members of the royal family, male members of the royal family, who at the time were capable of fathering a child. That's all I say.
Our viewers and
Now,
listeners will look
that
into
came out from me. I'm the one that found that link. I asked Jeremy, can I publish it? Because it's important. He said, well, even he did not know what the actual link was. And let me say something else too. Motive. People kill people for motive, jealousy, money, whatever. Now, you're going to say, and as the prosecution says, he was waiting for his inheritance. He would have got his inheritance. Having killed the whole family, he's the only one left to inherit. There's F all to inherit because White House Farm was rented. Now, nobody knew that.
Wow. But there seems to be quite a substantial value, though, in the caravan sites and the other businesses.
Rented property.
Right.
Rented. What do you get from rent? What came of that after Bamber was banged up? Nothing. There's no millionaires made out of it. The next in line are the nieces, nephews, and whatever. What did they get? Zero. Because there's nothing to get.
A couple of £100.
You know, small money, 50, 60 grand. You don't kill people for that. You don't kill your entire. It was better off them alive than dead. Leave aside the prison part.
Sure.
They bankrolled him. He was the golden boy, notwithstanding that he caused them a lot of grief, which he told me himself. Remember, unlike many people who have written about Bamber, I acted for him. I have the extensive, I've sent you what's on my hard drive, an extensive, and there's an awful lot of discrepancies. One of the biggest problems that I had, and in any criminal investigation, when there's a murder, do you know what's the most important thing in a post-mortem? What would you think? Thank you very much. And you're not even a lawyer, just an average, person who's intelligent and who can, sum up the situation. You need to know, when did these people die? Now, how is it that Professor Venesis didn't do a time of death on 5 murders? Well, let me tell you the answer to that, because I've sent you a photograph that we published in the Sunday Mirror. The Sunday Mirror editor and the sub-editor, Gary Jones, had the cojones to publish that photo and say something's wrong here. Because if at 8:30, 9 o'clock, that photograph was taken and blood was oozing from Sheila Cafell's neck from a bullet wound, could not have been Bamber. Bamber was with the police from 3 a.m. We got, at my expense, I paid for it, an expert evidence on coagulation of blood and blood that it's maximum 2 hours. So the photo was taken at 8:30, 9 o'clock. Time of death was about 7 o'clock. So So Bamber was with the police from 3. Couldn't be him.
Well,
and that's why he passed his lie detectors. He passed the lie detector because he's innocent, not because he's a psychopath. Even psychopaths, they might be able to get away with 1 or 2 questions. But here, I deliberately made sure that he was asked, did you kill Neville Bamber? Did you kill Sheila Cafell? Did you kill, 5 different times? And he passed on each one.
And he is the only life prisoner, life meaning life, who still maintains that he is an innocent man. Is that correct?
That's correct. Even Levi Belfield has assumed another murder, which the police don't believe. But I mean, most murderers will help out other people and say, well, I'm going to do life for life. I might as well admit to something I didn't do, make something, not Bamber. And there's another thing about Bamber. Not many people will even think of this. In more than 30 years, why has he only ever received 1 slap from a prisoner? Now, you've killed 2 children. That automatically puts you on a hit list.
Was he not stabbed during a phone call conversation in the neck?
And who was he calling at the time? Who do you think he was on the phone to at the time?
I have no idea.
Well, you're looking at him.
His lawyer.
He was on the phone to me, and it wasn't stabbed. It was exaggerated. It was with a plastic knife. Someone just went and did that there.
Right.
It was more of a joke, more of a thing. It didn't know blood, no nothing.
Really?
That. But even if he had been stabbed then,
Mm.
even if, which he hadn't, this man has killed 5 people, a
Mm.
woman and 2 children. You'd be subject to constant attack. You know, Ian Brady, my other client, was in a danger list all the time. He had to watch his back wherever he went.
Yeah, he is maximum security prisoner, though. He has been classified as I think he spent 6 months out of 38 years as in time under incarceration outside maximum
Well,
detention. Is that
this is
correct?
where he and I had a difference of opinion.
Hmm.
The trial judge was Maurice Drake,
Yes.
who I knew. So I went actually to see him in 2010. He died in 2014. God rest his soul. He was a really. He told me straight out.
Hmm.
He said, Giovanni, I, as the trial judge, did my duty. But if you ask me, do I believe this man to be guilty? The answer was no. And did you know something else that people don't realize? It wasn't a majority verdict. It was a 10-2.
That's correct.
10-2, which
Hmm.
means 2 people.
Hmm.
And the legislation had only recently come in regarding that there. 10-2 majority. Now, Drake told me clearly, I said, why did you give him such a light sentence? He said, I was rather hoping that the Secretary of State, because in those days, it was a recommended minimum term, recommended tariff as it used to be, but the Secretary of State set the actual time limit.
Right.
Now, in 2003, the Criminal Justice Act came into force, which took the powers away from the Secretary of State, a politician,
Mm-hmm.
to actually sentence a person. Who was the first case to be dealt with was Linda Calvi by me, which we maintained her minimum term and she got out. I told Bamber, I beg you, Jeremy, do not take this case to appeal. I beg you. Leave it at 25 years because then we can fight for judicial review for coming out on parole at the appropriate time. But he's the one behind the door, Marcus. You know,
That's
you
right.
can only but advise.
Well, he should have been out 2011.
That's right. He unfortunately went against my advice.
Right.
And the consequences are that if someone does not follow my advice, I can no longer act for him because if you don't trust me,
Sure,
you don't have faith in me there, we can't proceed any further, which is a great pity there.
What?
But he appealed, and what was
Yes.
the consequences? A full life term.
Well, what
You
seems
see,
to be, sorry to interrupt, but I really need to get this from you in the limited time that we've got together on this. I hope you don't mind. But it's on the exculpatory evidence. It's the treatment of this evidence that could, if being allowed to the light of day, would show one's innocence. Now, there seems to be a complete contamination of the crime scene by myself, a complete layman. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a defense lawyer, I'm not a police officer. But looking at, if this is true, this is very shocking, and it will be to our viewers and listeners to see that evidence was actually burned from the scene because they believed straight away that this was a killing done by Sheila Caffell, and then that she shot herself. So evidence was actually burned outside.
that is correct. And it is absolutely appalling. You should never. But there's something else that the viewers don't know. We have 650,000 pieces of paper non-disclosed. 650,000. I managed to recuperate using my own skills and my own deviousness and cunningness. What they did was they led me into a police station at Chelmsford where it was full of paperwork.
Really?
So, of course, quite contrary to the code of conduct,
Yes.
I took some of the documentation with me. We didn't have proper telephones at the time. We had, they'd only just started coming out that day. Otherwise, today it would have been, I'd have had a field day.
Yes.
We would have done. So I managed to take away, and some of the documentation I have sent you, for example, the video, wouldn't that be helpful to see what the hell? It's there, but it's just disappeared. They've lied. And once you lie, you're supposed to surrender the case, but they can't surrender the case because there are security services involved. And why are the security services involved? You take a step back and you look at paternity.
Mm.
And that is the massive problem, a big problem that is. But as I say, you know.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, the police records, the logbooks of the phone calls, this seems to be one of the most critical parts of this entire case. And Mr. Bamber's defence is that the call that he claims to have made, there are two calls that are quite critical, well, three calls. There's one at 3:26 a.m. on the night in question, and this was meant to be made by Neville Bamber,
Correct.
his father.
And Bamber was with the police.
10 minutes later, there is another call logged, you can verify this or not, by Bamber himself. Now, Bamber then moved outside with the police. The police were meant to be 77 officers from the Essex Police Force were outside White House Farm on the evening in question, and 2 or 3 officers actually claimed, or maybe more than that, claimed that they could see someone at the window and lights going on and off.
Mile and Sangupta, I've sent you the logs which I found, which were not disclosed at trial. See,
Right.
this is the problem. When you fail to disclose at trial, you're supposed to surrender the appeal. You're supposed to surrender it. But, you know, again, you have to go back to paternity. And why were the security? I mean, like Andrew Hunter will tell you himself, you know, that we were approached, both he and I, by 2 members of, you know, of the security services, who said, why are you doing this? Let him do his 25 years and let him, you know, he'll be out. Don't do this. Don't ask questions. And the whole question surrounding paternity, as I say, and that's all I can properly and correctly say, paternity was assigned to a sergeant. But take his photograph when you have time and stick him up with 3 or 4 members of the royal family and have a look.
Well, he's got a full head of hair. So, you know, there seems to be some discrepancy on that one. But look, that is a very interesting part of it. And it is, I guess, it won't do Mr. Bamber much favours because he's really focusing on the 29 counts that
He's right.
the Office for Police Conduct are looking at right now. And that's where it's all going to swing, whether or not the Criminal Case Review Commission accept that to pass it on to the appeal courts. And this is
but they've done it already. They've passed on already that, and the Court of Appeal have told him to F off.
So where is he? Where is he now?
Well, see, when I took the case on, he had appealed and he had 17 grounds of appeal, and I said, this is madness.
Yes.
Why? You have to look at the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
Must the people believe that a judge can get it wrong 17 times? He might be able to get it wrong once or twice.
Sure.
But if you're asking, you know, for there to be faith and honor in the criminal justice system, and judges make 17, 18 mistakes, you are then devaluing the criminal justice system, and the Court of Appeal will hit you hard for that. And that's why in Palmer, I had 2 grounds of appeal only. We could have had 8, 12. And I said, no, only 2.
Sure.
And I was right, because although they'd made many mistakes, Judge Gordon, the critical one was made by the CPS, not by the judge. And that's how we won. Even with Nicholas van Hoogstraten, we could have had 10 grounds of appeal. I only had 1.
Sure.
Mr. Justice Newman misdirected the jury on the question of joint enterprise. I was right.
Sure.
Of course I was right. You cannot insult the criminal justice system. You can't devalue it by saying judges make 10, 20 mistakes, but they do.
Yes.
They do, but you can't say it.
No. There's a lot of ego involved and a lot of pride here involved. Reputation, pride, money, connections. I mean, when you're looking at this, you really are. It's a very difficult game to play with balance and courtesy and respect. You know, you're playing in the gentleman's club. This isn't a backstreet brawl, although you can do that behind the scenes. I'm sure you are a backstreet brawler in the legal sense behind the scenes, Giovanni. I'm sure you do everything for your clients. You nearly take a bullet for your clients, and you become
everything lawful.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's what I mean. You put your heart and soul into it, and you want to get a result for them. But looking at Mr. Bamber's case, there are a lot of people, high profile people, fighting for him, and he has a lot of support. around the world, because not just about him as an individual, but about the whole justice system itself, because a country is only as good as the veracity of its justice system. Is that fair?
That is absolutely correct. It was Winston Churchill said that you can value a country by the way it treats its prisoners.
Very true.
And it's absolutely correct there. This is not about Jeremy Bamber so much. He is the one that is on the front line and affected. He is the collateral damage. But what we have to do is to cure the defects that there are instead of praising what they do. You've got too many judges. The quality of the judiciary has gone down. You've got Mickey Mouse degrees from some of the people in the legal system now. You know, the training is non-existent. Nobody wants to go to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal is a horrible place to actual practice in. You're insulted. You know, you are devalued. They, you know, as I said, there was Levi Belfield's barrister. I'm not going to name him, but he's a good friend of mine there. He was treated so badly at the appeal of Levi Belfield that he just surrendered the bar. He didn't practice anymore. Really? And that was one of the most eminent QCs at the time that you could find. You know, the Court of Appeal is intellectually dishonest, you know, and it needs to be cured. It needs to have an injection of justice. And until that happens, Bamber is collateral damage. There's Terry Smith, there's Bronson, there's quite a few people in similar situations there, but he is the most acute because everybody knows he couldn't have done it. It's impossible. He was with the police from 3 a.m. Their own evidence. They've disguised the evidence. They've just 650,000 pieces of paper are missing. 600. I managed to recuperate maybe 1,000. And I've got evidence that's exculpatory that would get a normal, even Judas Iscariot would be freed.
Well, in the United States, when exculpatory evidence has been deleted, that's the case has to be written off, doesn't it? The case is kicked out.
So in England, exactly the case. As I said, Lord Justice Rose, Chris Rose, would say to Jafferty, QC, you know your duty, don't you? You know your duty, what you have to do. You make the mistake, you pay the consequences for it.
Well, that's an interesting point about duty, and also about the oath that you've taken, not just to the court and the crown, but to God. To God. If you're a God-fearing man all the way, then you will do your duty, regardless of fear or favour, as we've got a massive problem in this country with policing, which is another thing that we can go on to. But the policing in the courts and the whole judiciary in the United Kingdom, and to be fair, across the world, it's not just the UK. We're not an isolated case, but it is concerning to a lot of people. We obviously cover at Herd Immunity News the COVID inquiry, the ongoing, it looks like a complete shambles to the terms of reference. We had Hugo Keith the other day at KC, basically denying Michael Gove any further elaboration into the terms of reference about the origins of COVID. I mean, it's called COVID inquiry. The terms of reference, the clue is in the name.
Well, the clue is in the name,
But anyway, that's an aside that we'll come back to. In the last minute or two, Giovanni, is there anything you'd like to say into where you think this will go for Jeremy Bamber, and what are your overviews on this entire case?
In Italy, last week, a man who'd served 32 years in prison for 3 political murders was released because the evidence against him had been fabricated by the investigators. They believed him to be guilty. They wanted someone guilty. And the Secretary of Justice and the Prime Minister had the cojones to be able to say, no, you're going free. And if free he is, temporarily, but he's free. Freed by the court as well on the instructions that we want that in the UK. We want the Court of Appeal to stop being intellectually dishonest and to start freeing people, you know, who do not deserve. Now, they might get 1 or 2 wrong, but at the moment they're getting 9 or 10 wrong, you know, out of that. So that's the problem. If you say no 90% of the time, you know, you're not always going to be correct, and there's going to be innocent people. And Bamber is completely and totally innocent. He couldn't have done it. He's passed the law. And the lie detector is, you know, the polygraph is now encompassed in the Criminal Justice Act 2003. When murderers who are on license and drug dealers and that come out of prison, they have to take a lie detector every 3 months to see whether they commit any crimes or they're in breach of license. Well, if you can do that and then, and then put that into statute, why the hell can't you put it in that this man passed in 2005? He passed. They only let me do that because they thought that he wouldn't pass it. They never wanted me to do that, but they let me do it, and I thank them for that. And it's rebounded on them. And what they should have done is bit the bullet, released him, and looked into the case properly. I've got all the paperwork, every single which contains exculpatory evidence. And Bamber now needs to have the prerogative of pardon. After all, the prerogative of pardon comes from the monarch.
Yes, the royal prerogative.
And that may very well be close to home. And that's all I'll say on this.
Well, we'll leave it there. That's an intriguing way to end on a cliffhanger that the many people will keep looking at, whether or not they think Bamber is innocent or guilty. That's a massive aspect of it, of course. But I think the whole procedures in place in the system that we have in this country of one's right to a defence and a judicial process, that's really what a lot of people will be asking about. But listen, let me thank you once again, Giovanni Di Stefano, the devil's advocate himself, for coming on to Herd Immunity News. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you.